Welcome to the Real Estate Rundown. Wall Street thinks that U.S. home prices are overvalued. And they recently did an article explaining why. One of the reasons that they sourced was if you look at some of the publicly traded real estate investment trusts like Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, what they discovered is that their stocks are trading at massive discounts according to their net asset value. So for instance, Invitation Homes is currently trading at about a 35% discount according to all of the assets they own, which are single family homes across the US. And American Homes for Rent is trading at about a 20% discount according to their net asset value. So based on this, what they're saying is that Wall Street thinks US home prices are way overvalued, and that's the reasoning for such. What do we think about that?
Your assets aren't worth what they're reported to be.
I wonder when it was reported, when their assets were reported though.
This was January.
Okay, so
this is a very recent
they put
article.
A value on their assets in January.
Yep. And then the stocks are trading at that percentage of a discount.
This was according to a real estate analytics firm, Green Street.
So if they had 100 homes that were worth $100,000 a piece, and you said they're 35% discount?
Invitation Homes.
So basically their houses
discount.
would be worth $65,000 a piece instead of
100,000.
Then that's
what their
according to their
stock is trading at. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's what they're sourcing. Now, I think it's a stretch. I think that what they're probably factoring in is their cap rate, and their cap rate right now is much lower than it was when they purchased the assets, right? Because there's been pressure on rents.
Rents,
went down.
And I think Wall Street they're putting their money. They may be selling those stocks, and they're putting their money into stocks that are getting way higher returns than real estate right now.
That's very true.
Like AI, like Bitcoin, like things that are getting 30%.
Yeah, almost kind of like a move the cheese
20% returns, whereas maybe a single family home is getting maybe 6-7% returns at that.
Right. But to the headline, though, it's like, you read the headline and you're like, oh, my goodness, like U.S. home prices way overvalued. And here's why. And like, you read a couple sentences and you're like, oh, I can get on board with that. And it's not until you like really dig deeper and you realize like, no, this is just doom and gloom, fear mongering.
Yeah.
But what do we really think about U.S. home prices? And are they overvalued?
Well, we have lower inventory, so it's probably not overvalued. If there was a bunch of inventory on the market, maybe we would say it was overvalued. Supply and demand.
It is supply and demand, and the market at the moment is that buyers have determined that. I mean, yes, there's I don't want to say price rejection. There's price obviously slowdown because really the cost of loans and things of that nature, but houses are still selling. Their prices are not being reduced, and last time I checked, buyers determine the market. It doesn't mean that in a year from now that if there's some economic issue that buyers reject more and prices fall, doesn't mean that can't happen. But in our current market, no.
But also sellers determine the market too, because you get a lot more sellers.
Sure, supply and demand.
What happens? Prices go down. But there's a lot of sellers that they're like we talked in the past is they've got 3% interest rates. They're not selling their houses. Why?
Well, we know that the lock-in effect is definitely fading. More sellers are bringing their homes to market, even with low interest rates, right? Even with those low interest rates. So you got to think like so the Fed started raising rates in 2022, like March? I think March was like the first raise. And then
in 22?
In 2022. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of, between January and March, we were still enjoying really low interest rates. I think we were like in the 3s.
Yeah.
And we know that there's been a shift in that composite of interest rates. There used to be more sub 3, and now there are less. So people are refining or selling or, all the things. And so that's kind of waning a little. But Redfin just reported that the average U.S. home is taking 2 months to sell, which, 60 days doesn't sound like a long time, but that's average, right? So,
right.
You have homes that are sitting much longer, obviously, and that it's the highest amount in 5 years.
Which is wild, though, because, 60 days, historically speaking, which I know this has kind of changed, but historically speaking, that's a seller's market, right? It's a market that favors the sellers. Anytime that there's inventory less than 4 months, traditionally that's what a more of a seller's market or / a balanced market. So it is wild that we have all become so much of the click and have it happen type mentality. And that, I think there's another instance of that where you need to sell your house in 60 days. And if it doesn't, oh, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's average. There's probably people that are on the market for
months,
120 days.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And then there's the houses that are
gone in a weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, let's think back. Let's think back to when we all were, really selling a lot of real estate. And back then, I say back then, it was a while ago when we first started selling real estate. But when we first started, it was not uncommon to have a home sitting on the market for 4, 5, 6 months. Like that was not uncommon.
Nope.
And so then what were this? So here's what I want to talk about, because I think that this is a problem in the industry. I think that, absent condition, what is the only thing that you can really overcome? Price, right?
Price.
All you can really do is change the price, if you've met for the condition. And I think that a lot of realtors struggle with getting sellers to price their home accordingly, or maybe they price it a little high because the seller has expectations. Perhaps they're unrealistic, perhaps they're not. You don't know until you get that home on the market. And then I think that a lot of realtors kind of struggle with getting price reductions along the way.
I think a lot of homeowners are struggling too, because I think they may have saw a house that sold 2-3 years ago for this certain price, and they know the condition of it, and they think, oh, mine has to sell for at least that. But we're in a different market, so it's it's convincing them and trying to get them to understand that, hey, it's not the same market. It's just
okay. So let's talk strategies for that, because I think that I see this as a challenge for a lot of realtors.
What I love, the best strategy that I love is taking that home seller and walking through houses that are on the market.
How does your house compare?
How does your house compare? How does your house compare?
That is a classic. I love it.
Because a lot of times you can look at pictures and you're like, oh yeah, well, I know this, I know that, I know this.
No, go walk the property.
And they go walk the property and they're like, oh, this is pretty nice. Okay.
Okay, so actually take your seller out and look at competing listings. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a good strategy. Maybe even if there are new builds, take them out and show them what the new home inventory looks like too, so that they can get a very tangible feel for the inventory. Do you think that pictures in general make homes look better online or worse online?
Oh, better.
If they're done well, 100%, they look way better.
Yeah.
It's painting a ridiculously beautiful canvas, even if it's not.
There's a lot of glamour shots for houses going down.
If they're not done well, then no, you can make a good-looking house not look great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like fascinating, right? You'll be like, whoa, this looks awesome. Then you show up and you're like, wait, what? Did I just get catfished? All right. So it's like I like that strategy. If they're super unrealistic, you walk them through other listings and show them like, hey, but what if the other listings aren't moving either, right? And then it just comes down to like motivation, other factors. So what are some other tips and tricks that realtors can use to really price a home according to market where it's going to sell?
Well, geez, I'm totally reaching back in their archives for this, but I think sometimes actually looking at ones that sit on the market for a while and seeing their pricing strategy. A lot of times, like it was described to me as the ratcheting effect, where you're almost kind of chasing and trying to catch up to the market versus pricing to get ahead of the market, right? Again, like Jay and I were talking about, you can be prior to the show, you can be an expert in your craft. But this is where I think that really comes into play, that we need to be an expert in our craft and showing the people the data that shows them how to get ahead of the market. So going back to what I was saying, where you find a property that has not been, a comparison property, that they've chased the market. And then you start showing them, hey, look, this is an example of where they priced high. They, I can always bring my price down, but I can't bring my price up, right? We've all heard sellers say those kinds of things. That's actually not true, right? A lot of times, if you have a great property and it's cleaned up, right? Obviously, we're going to go into condition, but if you price it accordingly and we create a ton of demand, we may be able to put ourselves in a bidding war. They still go on where there's multiple offers and people will pay over list if it's the right property. So I think that getting the property priced correctly initially and showing them the strategies of how they're not going to chase the market through data is an important factor.
Okay, so your kind of take is pricing it right from the beginning.
Absolutely. You're
Yeah.
creating the biggest audience.
Obviously, yes. I mean, that's going to be your best winning strategy is pricing it right from the beginning. And there are times when, for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen that way, and you just don't. And you got this home, and it's just sitting on the market, and maybe showings have waned, marketing efforts are falling on deaf ears, and you got to do something to get that price refreshed or improved, as I like to see it now. Is
Price improved.
yeah, everyone's doing price
sometimes you
improvements.
just have to walk away from a seller too, though. So, I mean, not recently, but within the past year, we got a referral and went out to a property. They showed me the property. It was like built by an artist or something, and they wanted this astronomical price. And I was like, yeah, that's not
Not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen. And I said, hey, I'll list the property, but this is the amount of time I want, because it's, this price isn't gonna do it. And they didn't want to give me that price. Well, I said, or they didn't want to give me that time. So I said, well, if you pay for my marketing, I'll put it on. And they didn't want to do it either. So just walked away. And I just looked at it like about a week ago. It is priced with another agent or listed with another agent. It's been on for 6 months. They haven't done one price reduction.
Wow.
And it is, by
like
far
$700,000 too high.
Yeah, $700,000-800,000 too high.
They're probably going to end up getting fired.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or
And
give up
that
themselves.
agent wasted their time.
Yep.
You just some people are just very unrealistic, and you got to be able to walk away from people like that and not waste your time.
Okay, so let's go with the assumption that you already have the listing and it's
Well, I had
priced.
the listing. I could have easily had it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll do
Sure.
it.
So let's say
Yeah,
you
of course.
took it. You took it, and maybe that was an extreme example of grossly overpricing a home.
Yeah.
But typically in the realm, I would say that most sellers don't do that. Most of the time, maybe it's just a little bit. And the weird thing is you can just be like, 2 or 3% overpriced and you won't get any action.
Oh, yeah.
But then as soon as you get that price, and it could just be like the smallest reduction, it could be a 2% reduction, a 3% reduction. And as soon as you get it there, like you don't just have one
Bam, you
offer,
got
you
4
have
offers.
multiple offers, right? Like they come in threes. We've talked about that. So
Yep.
Keith, what are your thoughts on this? I know you've got some.
I mean, well, if you're going to try to price a property accordingly when you take the listing, I mean, I definitely have the same strategies as Elliot. However, I have definitely done when I feel like the sellers needed it, taking them through properties that are on the market to help compare. But I don't know if that's necessary each time, but it 100% works in the right scenarios. The approach that I took was, and not everybody is an analytical person, but I think in general, people like to see the analytics when you can spell it out where it's easy to follow, where we went through, here's what's active and here's how long, and then the ones that were pending and sold. And I would go through and say, well, as you can see, as soon as they did this price, when they got to this price, they went under contract in X time frame. But prior to that, it sat. And then, so if we take this same approach based on X, Y, and Z comparable, I think that we could probably result in getting an offer in, statistically X, Y, Z days. And that resonated with a lot of people when I took that approach, and maybe brought some people down to realistic expectations. Because like, how are you going to argue that? You can't argue the numbers.
No, it's difficult to do that. It's difficult to challenge the data when you're pulling that.
But
for
if you
them.
break it down nice and it's simple, they can follow. It's right in front of them. Oh, wow! I didn't know that. Oh, really? Oh, is that what happened? They don't know. They think they know, but they don't.
I have a little one that we did and it's been so long ago and I'm trying to remember, but you remember that one time where we were having a hard time getting somebody to reduce their price, and it had already been like 3-4 months, and this is back in like the slower days. But what we actually did, because I think he was in his first 7-8 years of his payments, so we actually looked at his amortization schedule, and we were projecting that where he was at was going to be like a 6-month more or longer type absorption. And we started factoring like, hey, 80% of your 95% of your payment is going to interest, so you're losing that money anyways. why don't we reduce it to where we need to? So either way you're paying for it one way or another. And it actually was something that, you remember the math on that one? Like I said, I'm a little foggy on it, but it actually worked in that scenario where we showed him the math logically, and he reduced his price.
Yeah, by like 25,000. Like it was a effective price reduction. It wasn't like 5,000-10,000 where probably said, what is that?
I think we're in a
Okay, I like
market
that. I
right
like
now
that.
where it surprises people to the downside. I mean, you know how when you're in a really hot market and you're like surprised and like, well, how the heck did that sell for that? I mean, you know, I thought I priced it right and it sold for $20,000 more, and you're like, wow, like, you know, you're looking at the seller going, well, I guess I kind of underpriced it. But I feel like right now the market is in that surprise to the downside. So I think there's a lot of things that's just sitting,
Yes.
and you just got to get it even further down to get that house sold.
Get the attention.
Not in all markets, but I think there are, you know, some markets that are definitely surprising to the downside.
Oh, I'll definitely echo that. And one of the things that I see over and over again is I think that us realtors impose our own beliefs on what we believe a property will sell for. And oftentimes that's to a detriment to the seller. You know, like we can look at the data and we can have a good idea, but we are not like the holders of a crystal ball.
No.
And I think that there are certain things that buyers will always pay more for. And I think that, you know, some of us can kind of get in tune with that. We kind of understand that intrinsic value of like a cul-de-sac lot,
Yep.
for instance, or, you know, just, you know, a really inviting floor plan, or maybe a seller who's just really staged their space very well. And a buyer will always pay more for those things. But then, you know, you have other agents that just don't quite understand that. Maybe they can't tap into that intrinsic value like others can. And they impose their own limiting beliefs on a property. And sometimes I think that
that's so
negative energy or, you know, whatever that might be can impact the sale in a really terrible way. And we've seen that play out.
It's the model home effect.
Yeah.
It's like somebody you look at these model homes that have sold and you're like, how did they get that? Like,
Yeah.
Totally.
compared to some of these other comps, it's
Totally.
It's a showpiece.
crazy amount higher. Yep.
Well, it's
So-
kind of like one of the things we talk about at Zoodealio, right? Is people buy based on what they see. It could be a great property, great bones, but it's got their old stuff and, you know, just doesn't show that well. People buy based on what they see. And if we can get rid of that stuff sometimes or declutter, you know, solve the problems like you can with Zoodealio, the house sells for more money.
Okay, so I want to talk about something else that impacts the home's value, and that is its smell.
Oh, yeah.
And okay, so there's something about apparently, like after you've been exposed to a smell for a certain amount of time, like you don't smell it anymore. So like when we walk into our own homes, like we don't smell them, right? Like even if
smell
they
yourself.
smell terrible, we don't smell it.
Unless it's something fresh.
Unless it's a new smell.
Unless it's a new smell, yeah.
Okay, so but seriously, okay, and this has played out for Jason and I recently. So there've been a few times where we've been out of town and we've came back. And when we walk into our house, we're like, you guys know that incense champa? Have you ever like smelled that incense? You've never smelled champa?
I mean, probably, but
Oh my God,
I
where
don't
have
know
you
the
been?
name of it.
a
No, I
nag
don't think
champa or
so.
whatever. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is this incense, and if you smell it, you know the smell, and it's called champa. And we walk into our house and we're like, was one of our kids burning incense? Like it reeked in there like champa. And of course we like go to our kids and we like accuse them. Like, I'm like, Abby, are you burning incense? No. And I'm like, are you sure? No. And I'm like, I smell it. Like I've
You're looking through a garbage can for the incense
yes,
ash.
I have like a really good nose. And then of course like our
You
son
do.
denies it, and we're like, what the heck is going on? And they're both like kind of like angry with us that we're like accusing them of burning incense, and they're like, we're not burning incense. Well, it happened again.
Oh,
Same
no.
thing. We walk into our house and we're like, and we'd been gone for a little bit and we smell it, and I'm like, it smells terrible in here. Like if you smell the smell, you would know what I mean. It reeked. Well, anyway, of course our kids deny it. They are not burning incense. Our house just smells like incense. It turns out that our cleaner is using a new cleaner, and when the scent kind of like I don't know what they call it, like dries down or dissipates, the underlining tone of this cleaner is like champa. It smells like champa. It smells terrible. I hate it. And so
Champa
our
just
whole
smells-
house
just sounds
it
nasty.
Just reeks. Our whole house stinks. But anyway, okay. That's kind of an example of
Stop using that cleaner.
people don't know that their house smells a certain way, and it does. And that smell can be like a really big deterrent for buyers. That's all.
Well, one of the, again, I don't remember the stat on it, but one of the biggest things tying to memory is scent. Right? Like
yeah.
that's
when you gotta bake some cookies.
yep. That's
Put
it,
in,
exactly.
Put in that vanilla or apple pie.
Yes.
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 I love
Apple
vanilla.
pie.
I meant
It's
like
the
not
home.
like bake one, but put the scents. We used to do that all the time in our flips.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the wall plugins.
Barbara Corcoran, she was all big
Corcoran?
on that. Is that how you say it? Corcoran,
Corcoran,
yeah.
Corcoran.
Coco ran.
Corcoran. She did a big old video about that, and she was all, "Oh, make sure you put apple pie in the house," because that's it was like one of the most things that when people smell brings the most
Well, home ownership,
positive
American
feelings.
Pie, right?
But
Those are all things that tie
hide
to
them
the American.
behind the beds and stuff. Don't put them all out.
And
'cause
don't
then
like
people see
overwhelm
that.
people. Like,
Yeah, don't
Like
make it
every outlet has one.
if you walk out of the house and you still smell like it, that's not good. Like, okay, so but going
you have
back,
like trails off of
because
you.
I think this is like really tangible advice for realtors. Okay, so here's something that I just want to throw out there. What I think happens is you take a listing and you do this initial flurry of activity. I mean, we're really busy. We're doing all of this marketing. We're doing all of this, we're writing all this stuff, and we're getting it all out there and everything. And then we do, and then the market reacts, and we get some showings, and we follow up, and we get some feedback, and then I think that a lot of realtors, when they don't get offers, they just avoid their client. They like don't check in.
yeah.
They don't make a phone call. They don't share anything. And so then that seller is sitting there going like, what the heck is happening? And like every day that home is on the market to the seller is like 2 weeks, right? Like they're just very probably hyper aware that their home is on the market. So one of the things that I think is really effective and what we used to do is every single Monday, I would go through all of the listings that we had and I would do a check-in with the seller. And of course, when we took the listing, I would let them know that, hey, on Mondays between 1 and 6 p.m., I call all of our sellers of active listings and I give you an update on the previous week's market activity, the previous week's marketing activity, and then we talk about the strategy going forward. And so it was a really quick phone call, 5 to 7 minutes, and it would just be a quick check-in, and I would usually send an email first with all of the marketing activity, all of the market activity. And then when the phone call came, it would be like, hey, here's what happened. Okay, we had showings or we didn't or whatever, and do we want to address the price, et cetera. But I think that that was like a really good framework for keeping in communication with your sellers so that they didn't feel like you just took the listing and forgot about them.
I call it the ostrich effect, where they just bury their heads in the sand. Like, I don't want to talk to them.
I've done it before.
I have to.
And I had a guy explode on me one time, and I never let it happen again.
Ooh, what happened?
It was this gentleman in I don't remember if it was considered a retirement community, but that was mainly who lived in it, out in Mesa. And he went away to his son's wedding. He's going to be gone for like a month. And we were in constant communication. And so I was under the assumption, since he was out of town, it would be fine not to communicate with him. So I almost didn't communicate with him the whole time. And when he came back in town, he said he was going to report me to the Department of Real Estate because I abandoned the
Was
listing.
that dude, like he had like a
And
high
he
security
negotiated
clearance job?
the
Oh,
offer
yes,
himself,
I totally remember this.
and all this crazy stuff. And if I didn't bring
That dude was
back
cuckoo.
some type of, he had given me this booklet for like floor plans and all this stuff in this house. And if I didn't get it back to him by 5 p.m., that's when he was going to report me to the Department of Real Estate and stolen property. But yes,
that
that's
was a special
extreme. But
needs
what I'm
case.
getting at, though, is if I would have communicated with him and not for those 3 weeks straight that I didn't, that probably would have never happened, because that was his facade toward it. And I was like, wow, okay. And so we already had structures in place in setting those expectations and listings, but I let it slide. I didn't follow my process and it blew up in my face. So I've personally experienced when, I didn't communicate with somebody, it really affected them. And again, that was probably the extreme side, but most people aren't going to outlash like that, but they probably feel that way at some level.
So
Agreed.
Why do some realtors don't want to call their clients? What are some of the reasons?
They're
They're-
avoiding that conversation.
Well,
in the conversation,
they
yeah.
feel probably less than. They don't feel like maybe they are doing their
They
job.
haven't
They're
provided
scared.
value
They're
yet.
confused. They don't know how to handle the situation.
I think a lot of realtors take credit for the market, right?
Yeah.
Like when you mentioned that, you price a house and you get an offer $20,000 more. Well, guess what that realtor is going to do? I sold this house for $20,000 more than
Exactly.
comps. When really it was just the market's reaction to the home. And don't get me wrong, like you can influence it if if you don't do great marketing, if you don't have great exposure, all of that. Yes, you can influence it. But I think that a lot of realtors, take credit for it, and when it's not selling, then they feel like it's their fault.
Yeah, this reverse
100%.
credit. Or you could just have a seller.
Yeah, they feel like they have nothing to say to them.
I think I had one seller that, and I think you've had one like that too, whereas you get on the phone with them and like an hour and a half later, you're still on the phone.
Oh,
You
definitely
ever get
had
that
those.
seller where they just
keep
keep talking and keep talking.
And so you avoid it.
And you avoid it
because you don't want
to get stuck on the phone.
Time sunk.
Yeah.
definitely been there.
Yeah.
Or I think it's also too, like, for instance, if you're a realtor that doesn't do open houses and the listing's not selling and you feel like the seller is going to be like, well, why don't you do open houses? And so like, there's probably some agents that maybe don't do certain things. Why didn't you put it in the Homes and Land magazine? Right. Like, like you've got sellers.
You didn't bury a
I've
St.
had
Mary's
someone ask me that
by the front door?
Yeah. Yeah. A St. Joseph.
St. Joseph, yeah, thank you.
Do you know that people Google that, like the prayer to the St. Joseph to sell their house, like 700 and something times every single week? It is like one of the top phrases Googled in relation to sell my home is, what is the prayer to St. Joseph to sell my home fast?
Wow.
So people are out there and they're praying to get an offer on their home. They want to sell their home.
So the 4 Ps is not fake?
No.
Put it on the MLS, put a post in the yard, put up low quality images, and pray that it sells.
That is not fake. It's legit.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we're in a unique time, and I think the advice that you gave, where you have a planned approach, sets the tone. And basically, they're hiring a pilot, right? It's one of the things I know that I constantly use when we're talking with our members is they're looking for somebody to get them from point A to point B. Right, you are the expert. You're the one that's supposed to have completed and navigated, piloted this process countless times. So I think when you begin with the end in mind and show them the process of what it looks like, even when you hit turbulence or bumps, right, such as price reductions or, hey, the market's not responding to your price, what type of adjustments, how do we need to improve condition, how do we need to improve positioning of my home on the market, right? And so again, just having that planned approach, I think, is where it is vital to have in today's times.
How do you have a conversation with the seller about the smell of their home, about the smell of themselves?
Transparently?
I've
had to have that conversation many times.
So how did that go?
So how do I put this without sounding wrong? So there was just
Well, how did you say
it? Well, because I don't want to get throttled by YouTube for saying the wrong thing. They cooked certain ways. I think that you guys know that. And so like with curries and a lot of that stuff, it smelled. And then they would have prayer rooms where they would burn incense. And again, that's all well and good. But we literally had to be like, hey, every time this comes over, we're trying to fetch on the higher end of, things. So we can either adjust our price or we can come in here and adjust these things. Right. And I've had to deal with smoking where people are smoking in the house. And I'm like, there's no way we're going to sell. This is a great home. It even is kept well, but you can clearly tell that it smokes. And we had to embalm the house. Right. I had to get them out of the house for like 3 days and embalm the house to, because it gets all in the ducts and, those types of things. So
even the paint, it's in the paint.
Oh, it's
walls,
terrible.
It's in the carpet.
So how do you tell them? I just think that
you tell them to go Zoodealio and you can get the 2 payment out. You can get them out of there. And you can paint it and make it smell
100%
good.
would have told them that back in the days in a lot of scenarios.
You know what's so interesting is, and I find this to be a little weak. I'm kind of on my soapbox maybe a little. I should stop. But I think it's a little weak. And I think that a lot of realtors, instead of telling the seller honestly the feedback that they have for them, they will invite other realtors in. And then they will ask the other realtor. I have been on home tour.
Let's do a home tour.
Can you please say it smells like this?
When you are with a group of realtors
and they coach
you.
They tell you,
feedback.
They say, hey, listen, we're going to go into my listing. It's a great listing. It just smells, or it's a great listing, but the paint colors. if you could just please give me feedback to this effect. And then the realtor will coach the other realtors on what to say. And I think it's weak. I have no respect for that. If you're taking a listing, they're hiring you to be the professional, and you're going to have hard conversations. That's why you are doing what you're doing, and that's why you're making the commission that you're making. And if you can't have that open and honest conversation with that seller, there's a guy on YouTube. His name is Dan O'Connor. He teaches great communication strategies. Go watch him and learn how to be a better communicator, because that's obviously an insecurity you have, and not being able to share that with them.
Hey, your home smells like shit. We got to do something about it.
You can have empathy and you can be kind. But like, I think it's terrible when it's like the strategy is get other realtors to say it for you. And then you just sit back and I don't know. I hate when they do that.
I mean, they'll naturally say things that, I mean, it's obvious, right?
Well, and I think has the last couple of years, and I mean, I realize it's been tough out there for like the last 18 months, give or take. But everything that we're talking about today, is this related to that, Inman's new stat that they just dropped? What wasn't it? 72%? 71% of real estate agents in 2024 did not close a transaction.
Wow, they had a zero. So out of 100 agents, 29 agents or 71 agents didn't have one transaction.
And 29 of them closed.
Years.
Yeah, only 29 of them closed one or more.
Mm-hmm.
For the entire 365 days.
I think
that's such a waste of money, because they pay for all their licensing.
Oh yeah.
I think it's fake. I think it's a fake number.
You think it's fake?
I do. I don't see a good source on that. That's just my gut. But it's close. It's probably close.
Clickbait?
I swear we used to look at, and again, NAR removed a lot of their numbers, but man, I swear that I was looking at some data within the last 3 to 5 years that on average, almost 50% of real estate agents don't close a deal.
Mm-hmm.
So if
is it real estate agents or realtors?
The Inman stat, I'm not sure, to be real.
Because then you're talking about over 2 million.
Yeah, I don't know for sure.
Versus realtors at roughly 1.5.
The point is we know with 4 million transactions that there were less transactions to go around.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's
we know
that,
we didn't break
right?
4 million transactions, right? We don't know what the final numbers were.
1.4 million realtors. It was just over 4 million resale transactions. So 1.4 million realtors, only 4 million transactions. Like, yeah, there's a disconnect there.
That is a disconnect. And I mean, I think that's where it really, guys, this is where you need to take heed in the things that we're talking about up here today. You have to sharpen your saw in these times. And it's not just put the house on the MLS or, do a TikTok video. And again, I'm not hating on those things and think that it's just going to make it rain. You have to be the professional. You have to practice fiduciary, and you have to begin with the end in mind and by having a plan and run your business, as you should, as it always should have been. Sorry, now I'm getting on my soapbox.
No, it's okay.
But we're not talking to any of you listening. You're all super dialed in because you're listening to this podcast.
Yes, and you use Zoodealio.
That's why you're going to take more listings you've took in 2025.
Yep.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've gained value from this episode, please be sure to leave us a comment, and hit that notification bell so you're updated of our new episodes. Thanks for tuning in.